Hi, everyone. This is Ellen, and I'm taking a little bit of a step to the side of our standard journalism work to do some work in support of writing practice and to give you a tool to work with your students. This is really taking 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe more steps back, but I think it's integral to what you're doing as English language teachers to help kids when they get into journalism, when you're trying to diagnose what's going on with their writing. When you start working with writers, they are going to start stretching past their current abilities. And as you're trying to coach them to the next level that you see that they can achieve, you're going to need to use some diagnostic tools and sort of diagnostic language to help them see what's holding them back. There's a whole slew of things that you're going to be using. Some of those are in the Roy Peter Clark book, talking about things from kind of a conceptual but direct way to look at language, or using Strunk and White's Elements of Style. But there's even one step further back than that I think a lot of kids aren't clear on, and that's our basic building blocks of grammar. And that's talking about the basic parts of a sentence, because sometimes kids, when they're getting started, when you're talking about passive voices we've been doing here, or you're talking about present past tense or subject for agreement or whatever, those are terms that we're really familiar with and use almost, just kind of an everyday speech in a journalism classroom. But there are kids who don't know really what those things mean. So I'm just going to use a quick tool that I used to use. I used it in all of my 9th grade classes, whether basic 9th grade, honors 9th grade, to the stars 9th grade, I didn't care. I use this quick little presentation, which is a little bit non-traditional, to teach the 8 parts of speech. Kids came to me with years of grammar practice. I had years of grammar practice. You had great years of grammar practice. You learned all of this stuff, but you often learned it to the side of your writing practice. Grammar is often taught as a standalone, and then we're supposed to apply it in our writing. We don't often bring it together very much in the early years of learning writing. So it can happen that they become kind of separated by the time kids get to us in 9th or 10th grade. And so we're trying to go through these basic things. They're still a little muddled. So I have about a 15-minute presentation. It may go a little longer. About the 8 parts of speech. Now, a caveat here. I was one of those kids who did all the grammar lessons and did very well on them. I got the right grades you were supposed to get on grammar. I was able to do all of that. But my mother, who was also an English teacher, when I would come home and talk to her, she was really, really not pleased that I didn't seem to be able to show how those things were going to work in my sentences when she was trying to explain something to me about a piece of writing. So just like sometimes parents make kids learn the times tables, 8 times 9 is 72, 6 times 4 is 24. My mom made me memorize grammar in this way, and these 8 parts of speech. It's a really unusual way to come at it. It's a heuristic. It's meant to be held in your head so that 80% of the time you can use this and it'll work. 20% of the time you or your students will be driving over to the grammar books for some more serious, finer points of grammar. So I don't mean to say that this is a be-all, end-all of the parts of speech. But if you find yourself with a need this fall or next spring or a year from now thinking, I think I need to back up a little and help the kids with basic grammar, here is a super easy tool to walk them through. It's kind of funny. It's kind of fun. There's a little contest in the middle of this that you'll see. And there might even be in your version of this that I'm doing here as a recording, we might even have a guest star if you're halfway through. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the 8 parts of speech, again, in a very non-traditional way. And I'm telling you, I've got these 8 parts of speech in a very specific order for a very specific reason. And I'll get to that. But these are the 8 parts of speech, specific order with some specific directions. And my experience has been that students, when they go through it this way, have a clarity about things. They have a way to come at the diagnostic piece of what's going on in a sentence with more confidence. And that's the main purpose for this. So you ready? Here we go. Let me share a screen and get going. Okay, so here we are, the parts of speech in the English language. In our language, there are 8 formal root parts of speech, 8 of them. There are 8 buckets. in any sentence, when you're looking at them at the most basic level, every word in a sentence can go into one of these buckets. If you were to label them, you could cut up a sentence and start throwing the words in a bucket. That's how we're going to come at it. Again, I'm just going to state what I said about 6 times before. This is a bare bones rule of thumb guide to those 8 basic atomic parts of speech in the English language. It's not meant. Sorry, I'm having a little glitch here with my presentation. There we go. And it's not intended to provide the explanation and answers to your every grammar question. But thank heavens that great grammar books have been written for those additional questions. So I'm going to take a little moment for a public service announcement before we go into the meat of this presentation. And I'm going to suggest 3 texts that you might want to have on your teacher desk that you know how to use and that you've read and that you can maybe sometimes even gift to a senior as they're going off to college, or help them by handing this book to them when they're having a struggle point. The first is Lynn Truce's Eat, Shoots, and Leaves. It was a New York Times bestseller. It's a fabulous and funny book and a look at how to use our language better. The second one, and this one is not so much for children because the content gets a little PG-13 and R in the way that it's coming at things, but the Deluxe Transitive Vampire, a very arch look at grammar and language with some crazy, silly, not appropriate for children examples. The Deluxe Transitive Vampire, a handbook of grammar for the innocent, the eager, and the doomed. When this came out, everybody was raving about how clearly it rendered better writing techniques. And then the third one is one of my personal favorites. I love this book. This is Verlin Klinkenborg. Try spelling that a few times. Verlin Klinkenborg is a Yale English professor. He's a lecturer in English. He's a lecturer in forestry and environmental studies. So you certainly have someone who sounds like a polymath. So he wrote this beautifully brief book about just how to come at your writing with more brevity, with more beauty, with more depth, with more understanding. So this is more for the more advanced writer in all of us or in your students, but it's just a lovely little book and I highly recommend it. So let's begin with all those 8 parts of speech together. And remember, I put them in this order for a reason. And here is the reason. If you memorize parts of speech in this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the way to remember, if you were coming in a sentence and you were trying to decide what the parts of speech were, each number only can work with the numbers ahead of it. It never works with the numbers below it. That comes in handy when we're talking about adjectives and adverbs and what they modify or describe. So doing it this way makes it easier to remember, wait, what am I trying to look for here? And what are the questions that I ask? You'll see in a couple of minutes. Let's go. So here are the 8 parts of speech in our language. Noun, number 1, noun. Number 2, pronoun. Number 3, adjective. Number 4, verb. Number 5, adverb. Number 6, preposition. Number 7, conjunction. Number 8, interjection. 8. There's 8 of them. And now let's go through them one at a time. I'm using some definitions that are very basic, and you notice I'm not going to say some of the phrases that we're used to hearing. This is a heuristic. It's meant to be very simple and very memorable. So it stripped out a lot of words and a lot of ancillary stuff. A noun is the thing. If it's a thing, it's a noun. A noun is a thing. A barn, is it a thing? Yes, it's a noun. Is Lola my dog? Yes, she is. She's a noun. Is Maui an island in the Hawaiian chain of islands? Yes, it is. Maui's a noun. A pronoun can take the place of a noun. It can take the place of a noun in 2 different ways. It can stand in or act as the subject. Those are the ones that are I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they. Or it can stand in to receive the action. We call that an object or the objective case. So these are the subjective case and the objective case of pronouns. The objective case is me, you, him, her, it, us, you, them. Now there's also the TH and WH pronoun words. This, that, these, those are pronouns. What, which, who, whom, whose, those are pronouns. Number 3, an adjective. An adjective describes a noun or pronoun and answers these 3 questions. These 3 questions. Which one? What kind? How many? Here's a picture of a truck. The truck is a noun. Remember what I said? An adjective can describe a noun or a pronoun. That's number 2 and number 1. And it has to be able to answer one of these 3 questions or to describe by answering one of these 3 questions. Which one, what kind, how many? Here's a truck. You can come at this in different ways. Which truck? Fire truck. or I could say, which one? Red truck. What kind? Fire truck. How many? One truck. See how that works? Which one? What kind? How many? Those are the questions for an adjective. And that's part of speech number 3. Number 4 is really, it's in the middle, and it ought to be, because it's the heartbeat of our language. Verbs. Part of speech number 4 is verbs. A verb shows action. Run, jump, throw, play, eat, speak, drink, toss, hand, give. These are all verbs, and they are verbs that show and connote action. Here are 2 pictures. Lola in her favorite chair. You could choose several verbs for this sentence, and if you were doing so, Lola sits in her favorite chair. Lola yawns in her favorite chair. Lola sunbathes in her favorite chair. Lola rests in her favorite chair. All of those are action verbs. In the other picture, which was taken at AT&T Park in San Francisco, Sergio Romo blank before game time at AT&T Park in San Francisco. So you can say Sergio Romo stretches before game time. Sergio Romo throws before game time. Sergio Romo pitches before game time. Sergio Romo does many other things. I was going to say some people would say he would choke, but I don't think he does. He was a great pitcher. So those are action verbs. And then there are 22 other common verbs that I add, which don't show action. So they're tricky. They don't follow that rule of verb show action, but they are verbs and they're often misunderstood. I'm going to bring in a guest star for this one to show you the test that my mom used to make me do and that I made all of my students do for, I don't know, the last 20 years. She did them for about the last 50 years. This is Jane Austen, my mom. She was an English teacher in public and private schools, never journalism. She never taught journalism, but she taught a lot of English classes. She made me memorize these verbs and say them in 10 seconds or less. So I always had this list of verbs that don't look like verbs, but when I was stuck in a sentence trying to fix something, I could check in, is it one of those tricky verbs? Now, you'll notice I'm going to say something about the ones that are in red in a few minutes, but I had to memorize these for my mom and say them in 10 seconds or less, or I think I got in trouble.
Right.
Okay. I don't think she would get me in trouble. Here, come over here, Mom. You're coming out of the frame. So I'm going to say them slowly, and then I'm going to let my mom say them fast. I'm going to say them slowly, and then you're going to say them after.
All right.
Okay. Is, be, am, are, was, were, been, has, have, had, do, does, did, shall, will, should, would, may, can, might, could, must. You want to try it?
Sure. Is, be, am, are, was, were, been, has, have, had, do, does, did, shall, will, should, would, may, can, might, could, must.
Go, Jane. Can I try it?
All right, 3 seconds.
Oh, 3. She's giving me 3 seconds, not 10. So she's going to give me 3 seconds. So you ready? I'm going to try.
Sure.
I have to take a breath. So
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Is, be, am, are, was, were, been, has, have, had, do, does, did, shall, will, should, would, may, can, might, could, must.
Almost.
Almost. Okay. She's a tough coach. Thanks, Mom. Going to get back to this explanation. Now, I actually did a little exercise where I would give my students about a week to learn these and memorize these and stand up and do it before either a match, light a match and let it blow out, or with a stopwatch. I often hear from my students that they still remember this. It is an easy one it's a fun game. It makes grammar a little more fun, as you could see. It also does serve a real purpose. Now, to the left, you'll notice that I have is, be, am, or, was, were, been in red, and I'm sure that by now you know why that is. Is, be, am, or, was, were, been. They are verbs of, they show that something exists. They're called state of being verbs. They just show, this is the cap to a bottle. Nothing to say there. It's not moving. It's not doing anything. This is Ellen. Yeah, okay. What about it? Or what about her? So they're just state of being. That's not to say that they're bad verbs. State of being verbs are really, really integral, and they're among the first verbs that we learn in our lifetime when we start speaking this language. However, when you are writing and engaged in the practice of strong writing, the general guidance in American literary practice is to try to use more active voice than passive voice. The exception to that is if you're a defense attorney defending someone who is accused of a crime, you try to use passive voice because it makes a crime. If you say he killed her in active voice, That really sounds more serious than she was killed by him. Now, this isn't just me saying this. There are books written about this. But in general, as writers, we try to stay away from passive voice whenever we can, and we guide our students to do this. In journalism, we want to keep to active verbs because passive verbs burn up a lot of real estate and they don't help us. They don't give us information. We can't see anything with an is, be, am, or was, were, been. I'm going to add the ing form being because sometimes that creeps into writing and people miss it. That's just taking one of these passive verbs and trying to hide it by turning it into a different part of speech in a sentence. It also should get out of there. Now, sometimes you need is verbs, but in general, I think call me Ishmael is a lot better way to start a book than this is Ishmael, right? And that's the beginning to Moby Dick, by the way. I'm sure everybody knew that, but okay. Part of speech number 5, adverbs. Adverbs describe everything else. Well, that's a funny way to put it. Well, what do adjectives describe? Nouns and pronouns. And now we went from nouns and pronouns to verbs, adjectives, and now we're on adverbs. Therefore, if adjectives describe nouns and pronouns, adverbs describe everything else that we talked about up to now. So adverbs describe adjectives, verbs, and other adverbs, number 3, number 4, number 5. Adverbs can only describe or point at, and that's a good way to do this. When you say describe, what is it modifying? What is it describing? What's it talking about? And if you draw an arrow inside a sentence from a word that you're trying to figure out and you can point it to another word, if you have a word that's pointing to another word and it's describing an adjective or giving information about an adverb or giving information about a verb or giving information on another adverb, then you're talking about that is a describing word called an adverb. Adverbs answer these 4 questions: how, when, where, how much. How, when, where, how much. Remember adjectives, they answer 3 questions. Which one, what kind, how many. Adverbs answer 4 questions: how, when, where, how much. Or sometimes that's phrased as to what extent. So I have a sentence over here that you can take your time and take a look at and see if you can figure out what all the parts of speech are in here, because there's some tricky ones in here. And here's the sentence. The Giants pitcher threw a very fast knuckleball pitch. Identify the part of speech for each word in the short sentence. It's trickier than it looks. And if you want to know what they are, come see me some Tuesday night and I'll tell you. Prepositions relate one object to another one. When you think prepositions, here's what you do. I'll give you 2 scenarios. The one that a lot of my students have been taught was the mouse, table, box option. And maybe you've heard that one. Maybe that's how you learned it. You draw a table, then you draw a box, then you draw a tiny little mouse. Anything the mouse can do or anywhere the mouse can go in relation to the table or the box is a preposition. So if the mouse hides beside the box, beside is the preposition. It shows the relation of where's the mouse in relation to the box. It's beside the box. The mouse sits under the table. It shows the relationship of the mouse and the table. It's under the table. The mouse jumps onto the table to get inside the box. Now we have the mouse in relation to several objects in the same sentence. The mouse jumps onto the table to get inside the box. Onto and inside are your prepositions. The second way to do this that an equally large group of students had learned, depending on who their primary school teacher was who taught them prepositions, was the beehive. So the beehive is, imagine a beehive. And there are bees coming in and out of that beehive all day long. Anywhere the bee can go in relationship to the beehive is a preposition. The bee flies inside the hive. The bee flies out of the hive. The bee is under the hive. The bee is around the hive. The bee goes around the hive. The bee is above the hive. You get it. So those words are prepositions. And, some kids just really like the mouse, table, box. Some kids really, for whatever reason, work better with the beehive analogy. Whatever you think works best, go with it. And if you have another one that's similar, run with that. Part of speech number 7, conjunctions connect. Conjunctions connect. It connects words, clauses, or phrases. The most common examples of conjunctions that bring 2 words together are and, but, or, either, and nor. Those are called coordinating junctions. They bring things together. They kind of coordinate them. You want to wear, you have a hat and a tie. They're coordinated. And, but, or, either, nor. There are dozens of others. The coordinating conjunctions are very easy to use, and students love to use them a lot. They don't give their writing as much variety as you might want them to have. And there's another category of conjunctions that need to be put into action, because this next category, called subordinating conjunctions, allows students to take 2 sentences, and by using a subordinating conjunction, instead of having 2 sentences kind of sitting there all alone, You can bring two sentences together and gain pacing, structure, style, elegance in your writing. So subordinating conjunction, technically, what it does is it connects a dependent clause. When you put the subordinating conjunction on, it kind of is like, it sort of gives a sentence a spring. When you add a subordinating conjunction, you sort of make it sprained. It can't stand on its own. It needs an independent clause to stand with it. So subordinating conjunction connects a dependent clause to an independent clause to make a really kind of cool sentence. We like these kinds of sentences, but our students don't use them enough. They like to read them, but they just don't think of writing them this way. So you have to walk them through this. They're a handy tool. I love them. And here's an example. Although thousands of acorns drop from the oak trees every autumn, that's the dependent clause. That's the subordinate clause. Although is the thing that triggers it. Please notice that this would be a sentence on its own. Thousands of acorns drop from the oak trees every autumn. That's a very good sentence that can stand on its own. Can go walk around the block by itself, it's fine. But as soon as I put an although on it, that although triggers it to need an independent clause. Just adding a subordinating conjunction causes it to need that independent, a comma and an independent clause on the other side. So although thousands of acorns drop from the oak trees every autumn, comma, not every acorn grows into a tall oak tree. So these were the two sentences. Thousands of acorns drop from oak trees every autumn. Not every acorn grows into a tall oak tree. Those were two independent clauses. Those were two full sentences on their own. They stood fine. They were great. But by bringing them together, we have a kind of a cooler sentence, I guess I'll say, a little more sophisticated. Although thousands of acorns drop from the oak trees every autumn, not every acorn grows into a tall oak tree. When you bring a subordinating conjunction and a subordinate clause into the beginning of a sentence, you set it off from the independent clause with a comma, and then you roll into your independent clause. The next sentence there is two more. A giant oak tree fell after a rainstorm is the independent clause originally. The second independent clause, it crushed the small garden house in Ellen's backyard. And here's the third independent clause. Nobody was hurt. Now there's a subordinating conjunction in the sentence and a coordinating conjunction in the sentence. And here we go. When is the subordinating conjunction, but is the coordinating conjunction. And here is that sentence rolling itself forward. When a giant oak tree fell after a rainstorm, it crushed a small garden house in Ellen's backyard, but nobody was hurt. This is the list of common subordinating conjunctions. After, although, as if, as long as much as soon as though, because, before, even if, even though, if, lest. Please don't put that in journalism. Now, that, once, only if, since, so, supposing, than, that, though, till, unless, until, when, whenever, where, whereas. Don't put that in journalism either. Whereas belongs in a legal brief, not in our writing. Wherever, whether or not, and while. These are common subordinating conjunctions. There are, of course, others, but this is a palette to work from, and this is a palette that students have probably heard of or even used in another kind of writing. Interjections, ouch! If you have a hammer in your hand, and I was looking for a photo of a hammer to drop in here and I ran out of time, but if you drop a hammer on your toe, whatever you yell in that moment is an interjection. Now, that's interesting because some words only can be interjections. Ouch can't do anything else. It can't be a noun, a verb, an adjective. It can't do anything else. Ouch is an interjection. Huh. Whoa. These can only exist as interjections. However, when you drop your hammer on your toe, for some people, they might not yell ouch. They might yell something else. They might yell a word that we would call profanity. A lot of the words that are profanity that are used as interjections, those words actually technically could operate in a different part of speech in a different sentence. So we tend to use words that make us feel better. And those old Anglo-Saxon words, which were forbidden at certain times in old English history, because the Anglo-Saxons were not the winners of wars. So their language was also diminished, and the words they used were, meh, we don't like you. So some of the words that they used were just like, these are common coarse words. So those came to be things that sort of traveled and started to do some other things that we call profanity. But we also, for whatever reason, use those when we're trying to show great emotion without actually conveying an action or an idea. So interjections, ouch! And there you have it. Those are the 8 parts of speech: nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, interjections. There are 8 and only 8. And like the roots, trunk, and branches of a tree, these 8 parts of speech hold up our sentences, our ideas, and our voices. I hope that this presentation is helpful in terms of how to teach this. And I do have the unannotated version. If you want to use this, feel free to download it with your own students. Thanks a lot, everybody. And have a great night.